Welcome to the Big Kickoff Football Show with myself, Roy Shanahan, Neil Dobbs from thebigkickoff.com and David Bugle. And Dave, we're going to start with you. It's been a bad week for Celtic, losing in Europe to Midtjylland, losing last night to Hearts in the first game in the Scottish Premier Division, Scottish Premiership. What's going on?
At the end of the... we're in August. So at the end of the month, they've 8 matches. They could be out of Europe. They could be out of the League Cup. And if they keep doing what they're doing, they could be out of the league. They could be out of 3 or 4 competitions. That's how bad it is. So, yeah, they're at a serious, desperate position with Ange Postecoglou I said it with confidence, didn't I? In the hot seat. So I just had a quick look at it myself just to see, because obviously we know bits and pieces about it. They're all giving out about the lack of money and this and the other. But the writing's been on the wall for a few years there. But there was an interesting stat that was on one of the articles being written up. I think it was on the BBC. I'm not going to take full credit for it. That not last season, the 2019-2020 season, they had a 78% win average. So it's only one season ago. And at the moment, they have just won 50% since then. And it's the worst win percentage ratio since the 94-95 season when they came fourth behind Rangers, Motherwell and Hibs. So their average has been 68% since then for the last 26 years. So that's the position they're in for the last over 12 months of form. I know that everyone thought once they get rid of Lennon it'll make a difference, and nothing seems to have changed at the moment. Edouard's a shadow of himself, so do you cash in and try and get some money, or maybe is that why he's a shadow of himself? But it's just a bit of a calamity at the moment, and you just don't know where it's going, and you just don't. And of course, the neighbours across the road are just going from strength to strength. So that's what's making it twice as hard now. I personally think they rested on the laurels when Rangers went down to the lower leagues and just cheaped their way winning titles for 3 or 4. I've not much time for this triple in 3 years when the league was a foregone conclusion every year. The cup's fair enough, I'll give them that, but yeah, I think they've done it on the cheap, and they're now paying for it badly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I think when Rangers were in the league, I think the day that Rangers went out of the league and dropped to the bottom division, it was a bad day for Celtic, because after that, the board seemed to decide, well, when we get players in, we'll get players in not that are of the best quality that we were getting, and then get a sprinkle of, unknown gems, hopefully. But they'll try and get players in that'll just about win the league. And the level and the standard of Celtic dropped. And it was no coincidence that they kept going out of Europe. In Champions League, Absolutely. They dropped to the Europa League. Now they can't even get into the group stages of the Champions League. And God knows where this is going to tumble towards. I was looking at over the last 10 years in their transfer policy, and I'm nearly sure, I grazed over it before I came on, nearly every year they've made a profit on their transfer policies. So it says something about who they're bringing in. And I think when they used to bring in, let's go back as far as when they had John Hart's and Alan Thompson. They used to bring those type of players in, and then they'd get a gem in someone like Henrik Larsson, who maybe people hadn't heard about before, and he came up
Van Dijk, for God's sake.
And now they're going all out trying to get all their players from Central Europe or mainland Europe, and hoping that they're all gems and that they can sell them on for profits. So it seems to me that they've, as you said, rightly so, they've cheaped their way through it. And Rangers, when they came back, should never in their first couple of years even challenged Celtic. And now here they are, champions, and looking like that they could go on a bit of a run. Neil, it wasn't good preparation when you have Eddie Howe looking to come in the spring, and it drags out over 3 months, and then last minute, 3 weeks before a league is going to start, a couple of weeks before a big Champions League game, they put Ange Postecoglou in without any players. And actually, when he's coming in, they're selling Ajer to Brentford.
Yeah, it's a culmination of a really couple of bad years for Celtic. But the planning, I mean, let's be honest, they would have known quite early they're getting rid of Lennon this year. And they probably would have even known as far back as Christmas, let's say, that, it was set in stone. So for them to go through a multitude of managers or maybes and then end up in a situation where you're bringing a guy in from abroad. It's not ideal. Even if you had been looking at someone like Eddie Howe would have had a good knowledge of the English game, Championship Division, Division 1. You know, he would have had a couple of lads idea to bring in with him. At the very least, Eddie Howe had a very, very good understanding of the youth system in England. If you look at what Gerrard did now, he identified one or two lads, Kent and someone like that, that was young and up and coming, hungry, that wanted to raise their profile. Now, he understands Rangers is a stepping stone, or at least that's where they think it's going to be, that Kent can move on and move upwards. Postecoglou is after coming in now, and he's had no signings. He's already kind of bemoaned the fact that there's nothing there for him to deal with. And he seems to be getting a lot of support from the old Celtic guard, agreeing that he hasn't been set up with a good hand straight out of the blocks. I was also looking at the transfers there the last couple of years. If you take Virgil van Dijk, Kieran Tierney, Dembele out of the equation, they're guys they've sold on the way out for big money. But there's nothing like even a third of that being spent on players coming in. So I think you hit the nail on the head. The worst possible thing was the fact that Celtic, literally in second gear, were steamrolling everybody in the league. They had no competition. They didn't feel the need to strengthen. And as a result now, they've probably been caught maybe 2 to 3 years quicker than anyone would have expected Rangers to do so.
Yeah. Dave, this is a shambles when you look at it from the board. Why mess around with a manager for 3 months nearly, waiting on him? Surely the signs were there. If he's not interested straight away, you're not getting this deal done within a month. There's problems. I mean, that everyone understood that. I mean, even the newspapers were coming out with problems that Eddie Howe probably and more than likely won't sign. So this not only is the transfers over the time, but even just this managerial appointment has been disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've a month to go now, and there wouldn't, as Neil said, the plan and the preparation, which all clubs need to have in bringing in new recruits, is out the window, because if they seem to have put all their eggs in one basket with Eddie Howe, even though a lot of people seem to think it wasn't going to go ahead, like you said. So were they relying on him to come in nice and early and then to start getting lucky with it? And then it didn't happen. And it's like a poor man's Arsenal for me. They're like the Scottish Arsenal, the way it's going on at the moment, the way they're running it. And that's what it feels like. Now, I know a little bit of a defence for them. They have to rely on Europe a lot more and the best of what's in Scotland, because England's just got too expensive. You can't bring in a Chris Sutton caliber player in the mid-tables anymore unless you're spend 20, 25, 30 million. You just can't do it anymore. In Scotland, they're not buying players for that money. They're selling them for it, but they're not buying them. So they have to scour Europe and the best of Scotland, but they're failing badly. Or as what Neil said, the youth route, and hope you get somebody in under the 10 million mark and hope you're lucky. But they're failing in that as well, because the goalkeeper, as we talked about after off air last week, he just looks awful. And then there's Craig Gordon pulling off last minute saves to keep them in the and then there was ones in the first half, and it's just rubbing it in their face as usual. So where to go, what they're going to do, and the one thing I will agree, it shouldn't be down to Postecoglou to fall on the sword. It just has to be on. I don't know. Is Lowell is still running the show with Celtic, or who is he? Or
I'm not sure who's running it now.
But you don't hear from them too much. They kind of go to ground. They have a moan on a pitch once in a while about Rangers when they feel like it. But other than that, you hear nothing. You hear nothing about the progression of the club and where they're going to go. And from the outside looking in, it just they're going only one way.
Yeah, and Dave, when you look at Rangers are doing probably everything right now. It shows you that, like, Stephen Gerrard stepped in. He's brought a real professionalism, as in a winning mentality, professional view at it all. But he's got the players in, as Neil rightly said, that he knows are going to do a job, and the club have backed them in every way. The biggest thing here is they didn't have the financial strength that Celtic had. Yeah. And yet they've gone out and got a team together. So it's nothing got to do with finances here. This has got to do with mismanagement. And if you think about it, they spent 4 million on disco lights, all for the possibility of being in Champions League football. And now they're not even in Champions League football. So the club has been a disaster probably for the last 8-9 years. And it's slowly
great disco lights, though.
Good. Yeah, great disc. I seen them once. Yeah, I did. I seen them once. They're great. But yeah, it will be no Champions League this year. We'll leave it at that with Celtic. It's definitely a story that's going to keep on rumbling, and there's a lot of Celtic fans out there that just will not be happy. And I couldn't agree with them more on everything that's been said, especially as Neil said, the ex-pros who used to play at Celtic, they're getting it all right, and you know, someone's got to take it on the neck. Okay, Neil, you wanted to talk about a lot of panic in the summer transfer windows on signings. What's this all about?
Yeah, so obviously trolling through a few of the Liverpool forums this last week, and for some reason there's a lot of polls up, and it started off, you know, FSG, you want them in, do you want them out? And there's been rumours around Klopp not being happy with the lack of signings, and there's actually a very good one today where Jose Enrique came out, kind of, you know, Liverpool ambassador, and was saying, oh, they can't be happy with the lack of signings and the lack of kind of, you know, willingness to push the club forward. And then there was a little rumour come out on Twitter there just before we come on, which I got a little laugh out, saying Klopp asked Enrique to make that statement, to push the guys up high up, to give them an L, you know, kick in the backside, you know. So there's a good rumour, man. Klopp went to Enrique to say, listen, I need signings and you're the man to get them for me. But no, but it is a very real thing, I think, insofar as if you're a Liverpool supporter, you're looking at the outs, they're looking to get rid of Wilson. And in fairness, they've made some real good, tidy profit on the young lads coming out of the club recently. They've made, you know, 10, 12 million on most sales. They're looking to let go of maybe Shaqiri. He'll raise a few quid as well. So it definitely feels that Liverpool are a sell to buy club. But it's just the delay that they always seem to put you through, even with the Jota scenario last year where everyone was like, right, listen, no one's coming in. And then all of a sudden, bam, they hit with Jota. Now, they got their business done early in the window as far as nailing down the centre-back. So they got Konate sealed up. But it's been very, very quiet since then. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, is that the way forward now? Is frugality going to be the way it is? And I'm, you know, that old favourite word of the Liverpool supporters, the net spend. Like, Liverpool are in 10th place with their net spend over the last couple of seasons. Obviously, the two Manchester clubs are up there kind of spending 3 times the amount of them. But it just seems to be, after the year we've had with COVID, there's no, you know, there would have been little or no profit as far as ticket sales, fans attending and stuff like that. It doesn't just seem to be a Liverpool thing. It's a German thing. It's an Italian thing. It's a Spanish thing. That unless you have the billionaire sugar daddy owners like City, like Chelsea, you're just not spending the money. But I guess it's still lingering over Liverpool fans that you had a team that was considered one of the best in Europe, and you haven't really strengthened in the way that you might during the last maybe 2 windows. So it's a bone of contention.
Dave, what way do you look at that? It's more than likely the way that, you know, as Neil said, if you haven't got the big sugar daddies, that you're going to have to balance your books. How do you see Liverpool doing that?
I'd say the biggest fear, I suppose, with fans is something that we touched on over the last few weeks, is the fear of standing still while you're watching United build slowly but surely, especially now with Varane after coming in, and then obviously Sancho, and there's rumours of others. You've got Chelsea going hard, you've got City potentially with the likes of a Grealish and Kane, and all of a sudden we're going, all right, we're back in the pack again. Geez, that was great while it lasted.
Dave, are they not just rumours so far? Chelsea haven't got anyone, and
no, but they're actively going hard, and there's no denying that they're not. Like, these clubs are actively trying to get players, and there's no denying it. Whether they get them or not is a different story. But there's no talk of Liverpool being actively working hard on somebody. Now, I'm not overly worried about that as of yet, because Liverpool seem to do a kind of a bit of a sniper role, and then we be like, literally before this is over, there could be a breaking news: Liverpool have signed XYZ, and you're scratching your head going, where did he come from? But I suppose I had it up here just to see if I would segue it in at some point. But Neil is right, with the whole pandemic as well. Like, there was a combined 3.4 billion across the big 5 leagues lost in revenue last season. Obviously, German, as usual, only had a 4% loss compared to double figures for the rest of them. So they're all feeling the pinch, and there's no two ways about it. And I think what the biggest factor is that is ignored a little bit, as much as Liverpool seem to sell to build up the pot, Liverpool have brought in a hell of a lot of revenue in the last 2 or 3 years. And if they want to spend a little bit more, they can do it. And I think that's where potentially the frustration is, because they get released every year, go on to a guy called Swiss Ramble on Twitter, and all the clubs are there and all their money and all their revenues are there. Liverpool have made a lot of money in the last 2 or 3 years. I know they put a lot of it into the ground, and they're looking to put more into the new ground, or the new the back of the ground, to increase it to beyond 60. So maybe they're trying to be too clever and balance a bit of both, be successful and get that going, and then the match day revenues go up to another notch and we can compete with the big boys. But you're playing with fire when you look at what potentially Chelsea, United and City can do,
Yeah. Neil, does this all tie in with the strengthened rumours this week about Jack Grealish? 100 million bid from Manchester City. Leon Bailey, like we talked about last week, it was a rumour last week that he may go to Villa. It's now more or less a done deal that he's gone for 25 million to Villa. Does this mean that Villa are going to have to sort of balance the books here and let a Jack Grealish go?
Yeah, I think they're all balancing books in one way or form. But I mean, when you're Villa and you have a Jack Grealish, I think if anyone learned anything from Spurs a couple of years ago when they let go of Bale, there's nothing worse than having 100 million in the coffers and everybody knowing you have 100 million in the coffers and they can fleece you. So I think Villa are going about it the right way. I think they're sorting out a couple of these targets, 20 million, 25 million. There's a rumour of Todd Cantwell from Norwich being another alternative if they go that route. So Villa are definitely better off strengthening now and getting that done, because you know what I mean. I think they've let the cat out of the bag now that City have tabled or whatever it is, 100 million bid, or at least have expressed interest that is out in the open now. And let's be honest, City are going to get their man, be it Grealish, be it Kane. They're going to get somebody. That seems to be the way it's going. So Villa are doing the right thing, but Villa are investing, I think, in the right manner. The next question is, can they get them transfers right? Because again, referring back to Spurs that time, they went and blew 30 million on a handful of strikers, Rebrov and a few of these guys who just never really lit the touch paper, So it'll be interesting where they go with their 100 million. But I still think Villa are playing it the right way. They're giving themselves enough time to bring in new heads. They're not going to kind of go the Daniel Levy route, which I think he's going to go right down to the last day with Harry Kane. So I think Villa are doing the right way. They're investing. I think they're already pretty happy with the squad they have. Obviously, then you're losing a talisman. You want to be able to balance it out with 2 or 3 players that can go straight into your first 11.
Yeah, and I think it's Bundia from Norwich.
Yeah, he's there already.
He's got him already. So they've already got 2 players in who could cover a Jack Grealish transfer. So
they've already put in a bid and it was rejected by Southampton for Ward-Prowse. So it looks like they're kind of getting their signings in, and then all of a sudden that potential transfer to City could happen, I reckon. I think that's what it is. They're trying to get their ducks in a row, and then, right, now you can have them.
Yeah,
that's what it seems.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, no, doing it the right way, I think you're right there. Dave, this is an interesting one. The European Super League isn't dead yet. Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus are continuing on with their plans. What the hell's going on?
So I'll just read a little bit first, because it was just good. When I seen the headline, I went, right, okay, they seem confident they've got away with it. So I know you can still see me, so it looks like I'm looking at the camera, even though I'm looking straight at something else here. But it's they continue their plans, claiming to have successfully agreed or successfully argued against any punishment by UEFA. So a joint statement from the 3 clubs said a court decision on Friday in Madrid means European football's governing body have an obligation to terminate disciplinary proceedings against them. UEFA paused the action in June when the case was passed to the European Court of Justice. So the 12 clubs announced themselves as founding members of Super League in April, and we all know what happened. But Juve, Barca and Real were the only ones to not have renounced the breakaway league, and have again reiterated their intention to keep the developing Super League project. So basically, once again, the joint statement said a court decision on Friday in Madrid means European football's governing body have an obligation to terminate disciplinary proceedings against them. So moving on from that, they've said they're going to do it the right way this time and bring everyone in, bring more people involved, get the fans in, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, it's not dead in their eyes. That's for sure.
And would that mean, Dave, that the teams who paid fines, say to the Premier League, could possibly look for their money back?
I wouldn't be surprised. Sure, you're lucky your Liverpools and Spurs were willing to use the furlough scheme. to try and save a few quid. So they might kind of come back and go, any chance of that? Yes, like what's going on? You wouldn't know. They probably won't for the PR disaster, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up reading it. That's for sure, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
But I think we all know it'll want to be something pretty spectacular to get over the line for fans to be happy. But it's just interesting that you've got two clubs in Barca and Real, and then Juve, three massive clubs who are not letting this go. So you can't rule them out just yet. But a very interesting move from the European court. So they're confident now that they can carry on looking at different segue in order to get this to happen.
Yeah, very interesting. Neil, are we all conning ourselves thinking that this is never going to happen, and realistically down the line it's bound to happen?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. This isn't, this is something that's been talked about over 20 years now. I remember Wenger coming in and in the early days saying that he could see this kind of European type of league coming into progress, maybe in a different format, maybe what he thought at the time. But let's make no mistake about it. There's some real heavyweight clubs getting involved in this. And as we were talking on our last program when this came out, there's some heavyweight clubs that badly need for this to go ahead because it increases the revenue kind of twofold, fivefold. There also was rumored to be a hell of a lot of money in the billions up front for these clubs to kind of, if you look at Barcelona being a prime example, like they really need a shot in the arm. Now they're after pulling themselves out of the quagmire now because players are still willing to go to them on a free. But if you take this kind of freakish window out of what Barcelona have done and brought into 3 or 4 players, they're in big, big trouble financially because they just physically can't compete financially with the heavyweights of the Premier League, even the likes of the Germans, who obviously seem to kind of pip a lot of the other leagues with certain signings. So for Barcelona, for Real Madrid, for Juve, I think they see this as a kind of an equalizer, something that will get them back in amongst the big boys again. And they'll stop at nothing to do it. And there's a lot of guys behind us, the likes of Perez, who's a very, very clever individual. I imagine they foreseen some sort of stumbling blocks and some sort of pushback. Now, maybe they didn't see the ferocity of it within the first kind of 24, 48 hours, but that won't bother the likes of these guys. These are heavyweights money-wise. So, yeah, I don't think it'll ever be gone. It's just a question of can they do it the right way where they get enough of the kind of big players and willing to start off on the right track. So I guess we watch with interest on that one.
Yeah, and Arsene Wenger's name was mentioned there. He has suggested, Neil, to bring the World Cup to every 2 years, something that they're looking to bring in. If that's what Arsene Wenger's thinking outside and on a committee level, we need to get him back on the pitch, the training pitch, with a team. I'll ask the two of you. I'll start with Neil. Do you think that's a good idea, bad idea?
Bad idea. I mean, listen, there's enough in the football calendar as it is. You have your Euros, you have your World Cup. I'd even argue that the Euros is a higher kind of quality tournament than the World Cup because you don't have that kind of 16, 20 teams that are very, very low ranked that kind of made it because they were an Oceania group or there was no one decent in the group to begin with. I think every 4 years keeps it as prestigious. It means something where if you moved every 2 years, imagine the fixture congestion. It's already bad with Champions League and extra matches and that. Then you have more qualifiers, more groups. It'd be an absolute nightmare.
I was just thinking about that. You'd almost have to have a tournament every summer, like because qualification, you'd probably have to do the group in 6 weeks in the summer or something. With one because you've got Euros to contend with as well. It's kind of like, all right, everyone. If it was in a conference, I could just see everyone putting their hand up, going, "I have a question here, Arsene. Like, what the hell? Like, explain this. No, leave them at it.
Africa Cup of Nations, Copa America.
That's every 2 years. Yeah.
How do you fit it all in?
Well, his name was put in the hat for the Swiss job last week. There's talk about him taking that over, so let's pray to God that he gets that and these batty ideas don't come to conclusion. Okay, Granit Xhaka, Dave. Looks like Arteta has said today that he is staying with Arsenal after 2 bids were turned down from Roma. He's going to stay with Arsenal. I thought he played fantastically well in the European Championships. I haven't always seen that with Arsenal. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, definitely haven't seen him at Arsenal. He was quite impressive in the summer, and I wasn't surprised then the rumour mill kicked off a notch. And I thought Arsenal might just capitalise on it, because you remember when he was being, remember he kind of like pantomime, kind of when he was getting booed by the fans, he kind of gave it back at them, and that I always felt that was the beginning of the end. The fans kind of made their like they've kind of made up their mind in relation to him, and he kind of started to play like that and just kind of went through the motions. And then obviously I presumed it was kind of putting himself through the window, the shop window in the summer. And now that it's been a U-turn, it's a surprise to me. If he can tap into him, I'd be very surprised and I'll be impressed. But I thought that ship had sailed with Arsenal. So if he can get that form, I'll tip my cap to Arteta. But at the moment, I definitely be wary.
Yeah. Neil, it's going to be interesting with Arsenal because obviously Ben White has gone in there. Everyone's looking at that. Although some people want to try and make a mockery of it with the Varane deal, and he's dearer than Varane, and seemingly Varane's going to be the best defender of all time. He hasn't even played in the league yet, so there's no guarantees. But Ben White is a quality defender. People are starting to look at them and think, yeah, Arsenal have something about them, but they have quite a few positions to fill, don't they?
Yeah, look, this is a huge season for Arsenal, a huge season for Arteta in particular, because he's had that kind of honeymoon period. He's had a bit of time to settle. He's had a few transfer windows. You look at it, like, there's no doubt he probably could have done it a year ago with Ben White, or a Ben White character to go in there. Look, the price tag, we all know you could probably lob another 10, 15 million on top, or was lobbed on top of it because he was English. That's just the way it is. But once you get your man, once you get that guy that can lead your back line, I don't think Arteta is going to sweat too much about it. But like, Arsenal have some good attacking players. They've got some talented players. They just never seem to be able to get the balance between attacking and defending right for whatever reason. But like, you look at where they are, they've got goals all over the team. They've got young kids coming through. What's his name? Saka and Smith Rowe, for example, would be two quality young players. So I think they've got a lot going for them. They've got an okay back line when you have the likes of Tierney in there as well, as solid. And maybe Ben White is the guy that's going to kind of, the glue that holds them all together. I wouldn't pin, that much. I don't think it's going to be a kind of a Virgil van Dijk scenario where he comes in and solves all your defensive crisis. But they had to get that back line sorted. And if that was the price it took, so be it. But for Arteta, he really needs this to pay off for him. He's a couple of other signs there, like Partey came in last year, flattered to deceive. He needs a bigger season. But if they keep Xhaka and he can perform, if they keep that nucleus to the side, they should be pushing higher up the league. But maybe this is the one that sorts out their defensive issues. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, Neil, I'll stick with you. Kurt Zouma to West Ham. Chelsea won 25 million. I believe this is the stumbling block. I believe wages might be a little bit of a stumbling block as well. Is that something West Ham need? Is that something that's going to push them on to the next level?
Do you know what? I like Kurt Zouma. He came back from a really, really bad knee injury. If you remember the one where he went up for the ball, come in and his whole kind of knee collapsed. For him to come back to get into the Chelsea squad, now bear in mind, Lampard was a big part to playing that because he's seeing something in him. I just think Kurt Zouma, he's just not top four quality. So he's just a notch underneath. I think he's very gamey. I think he's brilliant. Sorry, did I drop out there?
No, you're fine, Neil.
I think he's gamey. I think he's brilliant on set pieces. He's brilliant on corners. He's brilliant on, at attacking the ball. I think he's actually one of the best in the Premier League from a dead ball situation, heading and attacking it. I definitely think he's probably a step up from what West Ham have. It's just a question of whether you think he was a top four player outright and then he'll be playing for a West Ham. I think he'd be a really good fit for them as far as it brings them up a notch. If you're a West Ham supporter, if you believe you're inside the top four, could they get a bit more quality-wise? Maybe not for 25 million. So 25 million price tag seems about right. I think he's a kid with a lot to prove. I think he's gotten better in the last two seasons. So, yeah, I think for West Ham, that's a good fit for me.
Dave, West Ham, there's been a lot of credit for how they performed and how they finished, went to Jesse Lingard. They don't have Jesse Lingard now. So they probably need to fill that void, don't they?
Yeah, of course they do. where they're going to go with it, because I know they still have Lanzini there, who kind of, they loaned him out and then he kind of just drifted away. So I don't know what they're going to do. That seems to be the more important problem, because with Moyes, he will always have them tight. He'll always have them hard to beat, any team he has. So that's a given. But to have that kind of golden boot in Jesse Lingard last year was just something that you wouldn't have seen too much with a West or David Moyes side. So that's going to be very interesting, because I don't know what it is about Antonio, but he just doesn't do it for me. I think I find him very streaky, comes in and out for 5 or 6 games, then disappears for 5 or 6 games. And nice guy, always funny, good to hear in interviews, but I just think he's just a Jack the lad who enjoys the crack. But I don't think he really focuses and puts the head down enough to really be the guy you need to lean on. So I think it's more of a striker, regardless of a winger to replace Lingard, more so than anything. Somebody who's really going to try and get you up to that 20-goal barrier more consistently, because I think that'd be more important than trying to replace Lingard at this stage for me.
And when you're a West Ham, Neil, you can look down at the teams below you, and this is where you are. When you get up higher up the leagues, you can start looking at the picking off the other clubs and the best players. Like, as we talked about before, a Wilf Zaha. You know, you're as you said, you're never going to get a 70 million for Wilf Zaha. So maybe this is where West Ham look at a 35 million bid for a Wilf Zaha and look to push them on that little bit more. Although, in my opinion, I wouldn't go after Wilf Zaha.
I don't think David Moyes would want to go after him either.
That's true.
That's a bit of history there.
Moving on.
But well, see, with West Ham, right? West Ham are in the same problem here as Everton, and a couple of them teams. Was that a flash in the pan last year, or was that West Ham having a kind of a shot to nothing? Like, at one stage, West Ham were coming out on TV and saying we're back in the Champions League position, and rightly so. Did absolutely brilliant. And what did I call them? A poor West Ham team. Well, a poor West Ham team were brilliant in the run-in, but can they repeat it this year? Like, that's always the question. So same at Arsenal, same at Everton. Like, they're competing with some, I'll say, heavyweights, because it's really, really difficult to break into the top 4. It's practically impossible in many ways. So are West Ham looking at themselves saying we're the top 6 side, or are they saying we realistically want to break into the top 4? Because I think, pandemic aside, there's no way a West Ham are breaking into the top 4. Same with an Everton, same with an Arsenal. There's just too much quality and financial clout in the real top 4, top 5. So, you have to have a little bit of realistic here. For West Ham to be finishing 6th is a brilliant season for them. For them to go higher, they fall into the same trap as all them clubs around them, is that, do you break your pay structure? Do you, you're either going to be really clever and really lucky to bring in 1 or 2 of these guys that can bring you up a level, or you're breaking, huge financial difficulties to bring in these guys. Leicester are another side that seem to do it well under the radar, and even they fall short in the last 2 years. So it's a real dogfight, that kind of 8th to 6th to 5th position. But West Ham just need to strengthen like all the rest of them, because they'll be left behind if they don't.
Yeah, now I've come up with one, not Zaha, McNeil from Burnley. He'd probably be the ideal candidate. So we'll edit that one out and put McNeil in instead.
Let's hope he has a girlfriend.
We're going to leave it at that. Dave, thanks very much. Neil, thanks very much. And we'll talk to everyone next week. Don't forget thebigkickoff.com and subscribe and get your fans to subscribe to the Big Kickoff Football.